So pushing through this action phase, I've seen the Armenians kind of trying to hide from the Tyrians and pushing their forces forward. Tyr likewise grabbing as much of Armenia as it can. They're going to get a resource phase coming up soon, so they get some extra cash by grabbing more territory, and certainly they deprive it of their from their opponent. The Moabs having real trouble against Edom, and some of this may be my stacking, but not really, because they got kind of wiped out by the initial force anyhow. Just the 4 units. I'm having some misgivings about just how much you can pull units out of the line, etc. I feel like until things die, you probably shouldn't be able to yank them out because, well, it's actually to your advantage, I think, to get things killed. So I don't know how much it matters. Half units are kind of a problem in this game because they cost you less they cost you the same to maintain as full units. So you kind of don't want them. However, there are a lot of units with a step loss, like the phalanx units that have like a 3 strength in some cases. You only lose 1 strength point by losing a step loss. So in a way, you're better off with those half units, but you're better off fighting with them, so you don't have to pay the excess maintenance. All right. With Judah advanced, they didn't take Baal or Baalath. They're they weren't really willing to do the siege here, so they moved forward. But now I'm with David, and I see there's 2 cities in this space. What's up with that? There are a couple of these spaces with that. I don't know how that's going to work. It's going to require 2 sieges, there's no question. But that adds a whole new can of worms. Now, immediately I start thinking, okay, you could split your force and siege them both, which is what I'm probably going to do. Those are easy cities to take. Or you could take one and then somehow mark that. That's going to be tricky to mark because this marker would mean the area is under Judah's control. So that's kind of a painful, in terms of representing it on the board. I'm not sure what it means, but then you take the other one, and nobody owns the territory or gets money from it just as if it's sieged, as long as they don't have both cities, pretty much. Of course, you could leave after taking 1 city in that case, and that just adds a lot of kind of questions in my mind. I think I'm going to be sieging them both, though. But just another one of those little, what's up with this type of things that I noted in this game. The current battle underway here is kind of interesting, not just because I have it overstacked, but the Philistines played ineffective weaponry against Judah, which means they get a -1 to every die roll. That can kind of pay off, especially with low die rolling units where you're getting almost a significantly less amount of damage that you do. However, Judah played surprise, ambushing them essentially. Or no, they played ambush, not surprise. Surprise was played by someone else. Surprise works for the attacker, ambush for the defender. Kind of determines your strategy. Which ones do you have? Well, now it's an interesting position because these chariots have 8 extra hits on them. I've got a set of 4 chariots in there. Do I want to stick around? I'll lose another step of chariots if I do, almost guaranteed. I mean, it is guaranteed. And I've got all those extra hits. Or do I want to pull out now when I've got kind of a good trade-off? Now, obviously, if I don't pull out, Judah might pull out, but they probably want to kill that extra chariot. I think I'm going to stay in the battle, but it does lead you to these kind of interesting positions where you've got a lot of hits against you, and you might not want to continue the battle so that you can recover in a way that most games don't allow, and I kind of like that aspect on this. So there was an interesting situation where, well, the troops of Judah were wiped out, and there's a leader still there. You roll a die, and on a 5 or 6 bad things happen. They didn't get that, so he gets to withdraw to the nearest stack. Just back here with David. But on a 5, you get captured, and the opponent can ransom you off, which automatically costs 5 resource points, and this is mandatory. On a 6, he gets killed. I kind of like being able to cut deals more. Actually, it's 5 points per leader point. So David would cost 15, whereas this guy only would cost 5. I kind of like having a little bit more freewheeling ability in it. This game feels very much like that kind of situation, but in this case, well, we'll stick with the rules here. Surprisingly. And we get rid of the action phase, and we go to a resource counting phase. And again, it's resources. Nobody's producing any food. Terrible. So looking through the event stacks, Tyre is going to play and increase resources, giving themselves some more cash. They have plenty of resources, but there's no real other use for this. And maybe if their padding's high enough, they've got another resource phase coming up, they can decide to build some troops at higher costs and try to win this war early so that they have to win it again later. They also had a counter I want to play next action phase. This is Bedouin raids. Bring a bunch of Bedouins in against these reinforcements coming up from Ammon. And I should have done that earlier probably, but I definitely want to do it now. Try to inflict some damage on those forces, on those reinforcements coming. Judah played to decrease resources over against the Philistines, and that's going to limit their production ability. All good. And after collecting those resources, we can take a look over at the chart. We can see the Philistines are doing very, very poorly. Moab, they have an economic problem. I mean, their initial starting setup is just not very good for them. And they don't have a lot of areas to grow, which is why they're attacking something as big as Edom. Other options might have been to throw themselves in, say, against either Judah or perhaps the Philistines to try and gain some strength attacking, to aid the other side and maybe get half the spoils that they wouldn't get anything out of otherwise. That seemed riskier. I thought Edom would be easy, but it really isn't, and they're going to have the fight of their life to try to stay through it. On the bright side, they can't be invaded by Edom, and then part of me kind of says, that's not right. You attack one of these countries, but I'm not so sure, because Judah was constantly invading some of these areas, intervening in them, and then able to withdraw back and not really suffer. So maybe this is actually historically accurate to say some of these are so disorganized that without that added impetus of an alliance, which might indicate that they're really, really unified and becoming, willing to play on the main stage, that they wouldn't really be able to take offense. On the high end, well, Aramea is still doing quite well, even with the losses they've taken. They're a big, powerful country, and they've got some serious gains. They don't get the money from Ammon. It's kind of strange because the money for those miners is tracked completely in totals, etc. But it's useful if you conquer the entire area. It's kind of nice for Tyre because they're gaining some of these rich areas from Aramea and getting their bonus from them. So their resources are actually comparable right now. Not that resources is really the issue, it's food. And Judah's doing fairly well in their comparison to the Philistines. So in terms of the economics, things look okay. Yeah, or there's a certain flavor to the game for different powers. But the way the track works and everything, the randomness that's thrown in, how you use your economics can be kind of strange. So let's say a build phase were here, and that could actually come up still. There are events that can be played to rearrange the action track. But build phase came up there, people would have to make a choice of whether to spend those valuable resources, not that valuable, the surplus of resources that they have to maybe build up some units. Now, many of them would just be probably just trying to break even and keep their army on the field. Others, though, might be tempted to spend some of their resources to build up some units But holding your excess resources is also useful because, hey, food's going to come along someday. And if I use up all my resources, I won't have them to match with the food the way I need to. Just interesting choice there. People might start looking at their events and think, do they want to try to scramble things up here? Would they get an edge out of maybe throwing a build phase into place? In particular, Judah, because the Philistine army probably can't be supported through another build phase, but I think Judah's army can. Okay, so here on another action phase, the Arameans kind of pulled back. They made one attack, and then Tyr moved forward, but didn't quite attack. But they did play their event, these Bedouin Raiders. Now I have to figure out some way to keep count. I'll use game end markers. Every action phase, they get one of them. After 3 action phases, the Bedouins are removed from the map. We're going to see 2, but then there's going to be 1 for next turn. They had a big stack of 6 units attacked in here. Unfortunately, and here was a decision I had to make based on my overstacking rules. They took more hits than they could absorb on their front line. So the additional hits hit their back line. I actually have one of these left. I just removed them instead of taking damage on them. With additional hits carrying over from there on the track if they came out to fight another round. So they pulled back. I didn't want to give an advantage of, I've got immune units in the background here. I think that would be way too much of an advantage for this overstacking situation that I've allowed. Anyway, we'll move on with Moab. One of the reasons for making the attack here, anywhere else they really couldn't do much. They could, I guess, take control of the territory for Tyr. I don't know what that would mean, though. I mean, it would just be something that had to be quelled, but it would be money that goes to Tyre, which doesn't seem fair. On the other hand, one hope was that they did enough damage to maybe convince Moab to go in and take Ammon out and just get that cheap bonus, because if the Ammon troops aren't here, this is very tempting. I don't know, though. That certainly isn't, they're not weak enough for that, I think. All right, let's see. Of course, if Moab takes just the city, just the capital, Ammon produces no more troops, and that causes a problem in terms of bringing more in. They have to conquer the entire region to knock them out of the game. But it's interesting. I forgot that Tyre also controlled Edom. They made an attack. The Moabs had a weak force, but they played a troop revolt counter and ended up getting a bonus chariot unit out of it. They got wiped out, but the chariot unit withdrew and joined their other force. My ruling on this is it's too damn hard to keep track of if the unit's not stacked with allied troops. Probably this unit is actually just hors de combat in this case, but the way the wording went and the way I've played it, it joins the opposing side. Well, given that, the only way to really keep track of that is to have it stacked with the opposing troops. So if it doesn't have a place it can retreat to be stacked with opposing troops, I think it just disappears. All kinds of really, different ways you can interpret these rules, and once I head down one path, I'm kind of forced into, certain situations that maybe I wouldn't have chosen if I had thought it out fully. Judah has charged in and also slipped up here for 2 quick attacks. With this one, they played a surprise attack that would allow them to fire first, but God is on the Philistines' side this time, and he canceled that, and then they're playing their effective weaponry, which will give them a +1 on every die. This could be enough to kind of sway this battle. We'll see. Not the case. The casualties were exceedingly high. The Philistine army is destroyed. It was an all-cav army. I don't know what there were, six chariots there. They're just wiped out. They did a lot of damage to Judah. You can see there's only 4 units where there were 7, and they're all reduced. The city has fallen. We kind of bypass these 2. But I did note something kind of interesting that maybe I can remember for when I get around to the review, which is more dice, more, you know, more damage occurs. What you don't see is sort of the trickling into battle that you kind of, I don't know, want to see. The first round would be less than maybe the second or something. I'm not sure that's really appropriate. Different rounds could be different battles, and that's kind of how I'm taking it, where the stacking really doesn't make a lot of sense because it's not a reinforcement of battles, etc. It really is multiple fights in the area. So it reminds me very much of, say, how something like Axis and Allies kind of works, where you're just rolling tons and tons of dice. In this case, though, it's a cumulative. There's no big bell curve going on here. You're causing casualties. There's some interesting decisions on whether to retreat or not, but that's really all that there is. I still have to do this battle, and then we go to the Philistine turn. Well, that action phase did not turn out to be a good one for the Philistines. Their army's almost wiped out. They have these 3 units damaged, mainly, left, facing, well, these guys aren't too much of a threat, but David certainly is, so they can't really confront him in any way. And it all really depends on what David does, but my guess is he's going to march up and take Jaffa, and just to get more cities, richer areas. The cities tend to be in more valuable territory because of the city as well as everything else. Alright, I think I'm going to have to load up yet another video for this turn. Yeah, I know. I don't think I'm going to be getting 1 video turns done ever, but this turn overall obviously has gone pretty heavily. What we got left, an action phase and another resource shot, and that will be all.